Minister, Deputy Barry asked you a number of questions, and I know you gave the context, but you didn't actually truthfully answer them. So look, I don't want the...
No, please don't say that.
Well, I'm going to tell you why, Cian Corla, because...
Truthfully answered anything.
I'm not suggesting any lack of truthfulness, Minister.
Yeah, well, that's...
No, I'm not. The point is that the key point... No, absolutely not, and I would never imply that, Minister.
No, well,
the point of this...
The Deputy is clarifying he didn't say... has not answered truthfully.
No,
right.
But the key point of the question was not answered because the context was given and the structures that existed and the people who were responsible for testing was outlined. But you didn't tell us whether the kind of testing that should have been happening in fact happened. Because that is the key question that Deputy Barry was asking, and I want to ask you this, because this is the bit I'm not getting, right? So Minister Ryan, in response to me earlier, said that the flaws were spotted during the process of the Leaving Cert applied. Now, I'm not sure why that was being processed at this stage, given that the results were already out, but perhaps it was appeals or something. The bit I'm struggling with is that any formula of this kind should be tested numerous times. You run it with a few sets of data, and it's not complicated. You have your formula, you take a small data set, for example, a dozen students, 20 students, 40 students, whatever, and you run it through the formula. And you should know what the outcome is meant to be, because you know what the formula is meant to do. You know all the inputs, you know the outputs, and you know the process that's meant to happen. And if it doesn't produce the results that's expected, you work back through the formula to see what the problem is. So that's what should have been happening all the time. It's exactly this detailed walkthrough that you're saying is after happening now. But the way that this transpired, it is obvious that that wasn't happening. That wasn't happening during this process, Minister. Unless you can tell me otherwise, it seems to me very plain that the kind of testing during the development of this process, during the development of this formula, this code, was not taking place. So, Minister, what am I not getting here?
Thank you, Deputy. Just to clarify, and your confusion as to why the LCA aspect, the Leaving Certificate Applied aspect, was involved. As you will appreciate, the Leaving Certificate Applied is a 2-year programme, and the 5th year results, the 5th year aspect of Leaving Certificate Applied was actually being uploaded, and that's why that was happening at that time. And it was, you're quite correct, at that time that the error was identified. In terms of the processes and the oversight and all of that, Deputy, I will say to you, and I have said it previously, and I say it honestly, I am not a statistician. I am not an expert in psychometrics, nor indeed in examination testing. So therefore, I can only give you what is the layman's version that I would understand at this point. And what I understand, and again, without any expertise in this area, what I would understand that there was oversight of the process, the National Standardisation Group, as I had mentioned, the Independent Steering Committee, the International External Reviewer, and most importantly, the Education Research Centre, who were running the data in parallel to what was being run by the contractor. And that's what was happening at the time. That is my understanding of what was happening at the time. An error occurred. I apologise. An error occurred. It was identified. Something obviously did go wrong. We're in this position now because something went wrong. And I absolutely accept that. And I acknowledge that. And once that error or errors became known, I think positive and proactive action was taken.
Look, Minister, I suppose if you can't provide this answer on the floor, then perhaps somebody from the department can after the fact. But it seems to me very plain that the testing that should have been happening wasn't happening, and the department got an outfit that didn't test as it should have been. You bought an application that didn't work. That is the simple reality of what happened. Not you personally, Minister, but your department. Okay, so that is, I suppose, the consequences of which we're dealing with at this point. My final point to you, Minister, is look, the key point in all of this is the solution, and I urge you to do all in your power to work with Minister Harris in relation to the third level places. It is the only game in town in terms of solving this, and I believe every step needs to be taken. I know people talk about capacity. Obviously that is an issue, but it's not just about physical capacity, it's about staffing as well in terms of feedback to students. So that needs to be the focus now, and I would urge you to continue that work.
Thank you, Deputy Ó Laoghaire, and that's a very positive note to conclude and go to the Minister on.
Thank you, Deputy, and I absolutely will guarantee that I absolutely will work, as I have said earlier, with Minister Harris, and I want to acknowledge the cooperation of Minister Harris and the Department of Higher and Further Education in terms of working through the situation that we are currently in. And as I have said previously, every possible effort that we can make will be made to ensure that students who are offered a higher preference place will receive that within this academic year. There is an absolute determination to do that. Could I just conclude also by saying that earlier my opening remarks allowed me the opportunity to again acknowledge the errors that have occurred in the calculated grade system, and again, very importantly, to have the opportunity to apologise for the impact that these errors are having. And I absolutely appreciate having the opportunity to do that once again. I have listened, not just today, to the concerns of deputies, but also the comments and questions from those of you with whom I met remotely yesterday afternoon. The Taoiseach, Minister Harris, as I have said, are committed to ensuring that we support students in addressing the challenges that lie ahead, and indeed when the revised offers are made through CAO. It is important to remember in terms of CAO, I suppose, and in terms of what happens every year, that following examinations appeals process, some appeals are successful and students received, as we have outlined, revised CAO offers. In essence, that's the exact same sequence that we propose to follow this year. The scale, absolutely, is considerably bigger, and I know that that is a challenge. We know that almost half of those who received calculated grades received their first preference choice as a CAO offer, and 80% received one of their first 3 choices. Some of these students will receive revised grades. Those who receive revised grades is not limited to any one group of students or to a particular subject area or whatever. There will be revised grades across all subjects and students. I appreciate the earnest and sincere way in which all of the deputies here have engaged in the discussion here tonight, and indeed who engaged earlier with me, and indeed who engage on an ongoing basis with positive contributions and constructive contributions for the sake of education, to which we are all hugely committed. And I appreciate the wisdom and the experience, and indeed I would say the genuine nature of the contribution that people make here in relation to all that happens in the education sector. Creating and building the calculated growth process and supporting systems was a major logistical undertaking, which I appreciate has been a much-used phrase over the last while. But even though it has been a much-used phrase, it does not take from its veracity. The calculated grades process was a direct response to challenges presented by COVID-19, and the process was designed and implemented in a very short time frame, but it was done in good faith, I have no doubt of that, by the Minister at the time on the 8th of May when he made that announcement. My focus now is ensuring that the work being undertaken by my department, Polymetrica, and the external reviewer can be concluded as quickly as possible. I want all students to appreciate, as I have outlined to you, Deputy, that all that we will need to do will be done to ensure that students who are entitled to a higher preference offer, all that we need to do, we will do to ensure that the maximum number of those students receive those offers. I will conclude my remarks by again apologising to the students of 2020 and also acknowledging the impact that the 2 errors have had upon them. We are working to resolve the situation, and I appreciate the resilience and the forbearance and the patience that students have shown to this point. I thank you, Deputies, for the opportunity to be here this evening, and I thank you, Cathaoirleach, also.